Having a hard time affording your lifestyle? Well, apparently, millennials making over $250,000 a year are in the exact same boat. Kind of. Let's discuss. Hey everyone, this is Kevin the Apptrepreneur, and this is not an Uber related video. I was just too lazy to change the logo, although, considering what we're about to talk about, maybe it could be in a subversive sort of way, considering how much Uber drivers complain they aren't getting paid. So, here's the thing. We all know that costs of living are going up, and I'm gonna be honest, I do not know what the solution is. You know, when people say like, oh, well, minimum wage needs to rise because $15 an hour is not enough money to live. You know what? Yeah, I agree. $15 an hour is not a lot to live for some places, particularly where I'm living. But what do? When you raise the minimum wage, everything else goes up in price. And now you look at inflation, I mean, the president wants the inflation to eventually come down, but will it ever come down? I've been through this dance before when inflation goes up. Like, people struggle, they find a new way of life, and then eventually when prices do come down, the companies don't pass the savings on to the consumer. The companies decide to eat the profit, and it becomes a never-ending cycle almost. Well, here's the thing. I am not rich, per se. Despite what happened recently with my job, we lived pretty comfortably, and now I am finding other ways to make do. And so far, I have been blessed in that regard. However, this article made me feel a little better to a certain extent, but it was also a little daunting to a certain extent. Because you hear stories all the time from young people who say they just do not make enough money to meet their needs so that they can get a house, they can start a family. And you wonder, like, well, how much money do you need to make to do all these things? And some people have very realistic goals, or at least they seem realistic. Like, if I made $100,000 to $150,000 a year, I'd be set. Or some people even go like, if I could make $80,000 a year, I would no longer be struggling. I wouldn't have to live paycheck to paycheck. But according to this article from Bloomberg, 1/3 of Americans making $250,000 live paycheck to paycheck. And this is a very fascinating bit of information because it almost makes you wonder what the point of becoming rich is if you're still going to be living paycheck to paycheck. So let's look at this. So, according to this article by Alexandre Tanzi, more than 1/3 of Americans earning at least $250,000 annually say that they are living paycheck to paycheck, underscoring how inflation is taking a bigger bite out of Americans' budget at all ends of the pay spectrum. Some 36% of households taking in nearly 4 times the median U.S. salary devote nearly all of their income to household expenses, according to a survey by industry publication Payments.com and Lending Club Corp. It's particularly true among millennials, who are now in their mid-20s to early 40s. More than half of top earners in that generation report having little left at the end of the month. Now, here's a budget stress chart for you. Here's the black represents the millennial, the blue represents the boomer, and these are what they're making price-wise. And the percentage that you see is how many people are living paycheck to paycheck. And as you can see, there are people making $250,000 a year, and 55.4% of them are living paycheck to paycheck. That seems crazy. The 250,000 plus income bracket roughly represents the top 5% of earners in the country, according to U.S. Census Bureau data. So this is not exactly some low figure. This is the top 5%. By the way, these are the people that we want to, well, not all, but some of these are the people that we want to keep taxing to pay for whatever the government wants to do. I'm not saying I'm against taxing the rich, but this chart shows right here, taxing the rich means you are still putting some people into a precarious situation. Let's continue. Living paycheck to paycheck doesn't necessarily mean hardship. And Lending Club makes a distinction between those that pay their bills easily, sorry folks, I forgot to turn off my watch, and those who can't. Only a fraction of high earners, roughly 1 in 10, reported issues covering all their household expenses in April, according to the survey. Housing expenses, which typically take up large chunks of the budgets of wealthier people, have skyrocketed during the pandemic. Now, this might provide a clue on why these numbers are the way they are. This next sentence here. For example, in Orange County, California, so I think this survey was primarily done in California, a top-tier home cost $1.7 million in April, up from $1.2 million in February 2020, based on Zillow Group Incorporated data. A mortgage on that house, assuming a 20% down payment, would cost about $100,000 a year. That's 40% of a $250,000 annual pre-tax income. And keep in mind, a healthy rent situation, a healthy mortgage, is less than 30% of what you make. This is getting pretty close to half. That's not healthy. Top earners, even those struggling to pay the bills, are of course much better off than the rest of the nation, which is facing soaring prices for everything from food to gas and electricity. Among all consumers surveyed, 61.3% reported living paycheck to paycheck in April, a 9% point increase from a year earlier, Lending Club said in its report. To finance their lifestyle, higher income households are more likely to put expenses on credit cards. Here's a good thing, but also more likely to be able to pay off their balance in full. That is how my wife and I have been doing it for a while, although we've kind of tempered this strategy since the recent thing was the job. We would put a lot of our lifestyle on the credit cards, but we would always pay them off, the balances in full. We worked within a budget still, and all we did was got some perks, which is nice. U.S. consumer borrowing soared in March by the most on record as credit card balances ballooned and non-revolving credit jumped, highlighting the combined impact of solid spending and rising prices. Here's a revolving debt. And here's something that's scary. More than 62.8% of 20 people making $250,000 a year never or rarely paid off. Sorry, I misread this. This is actually a good number. 62.8% rarely or never have revolving debt. And then you have 18.6% that occasionally have revolving debt. And then you have 18.6% who never, always, or usually have revolving debt. These are the people that are in trouble, by the way. They have credit card issues. A separate survey released by the Federal Reserve last week found an overall improvement in the financial well-being of households since the pandemic, bolstered by stimulus aid and surging prices in assets like houses and stocks. About 78% of Americans said they were doing okay financially or living comfortably, the high share since the Fed began running the annual survey in 2013. Still, 1 in 9 respondents said they likely wouldn't be able to cover a $400 emergency expense by any means, including credit cards, borrowing from family or friends, or by selling an asset. The Lending Club survey was conducted from April 6 to 13 based on about 4,000 U.S. Consumers. And I'm betting most of those people were in California and maybe even Manhattan. Now, here's the thing. This is kind of interesting because if you go to one of the middle states, let's say you go to a Tennessee, you go to a Kentucky, you go to a Texas, you go to most of those middle states, ignoring Illinois. Most of those places to live are very affordable, and $250,000 is a lot of money, and you can make it work. You would be more than well off. But here's the thing. Where are those jobs? Well, these jobs are almost exclusively in California or New York. So to get and particularly Silicon Valley. And so you move to these places to get the big job and to get your dream paycheck, but then you are living in places that punish you for having those big paychecks. People who work in Silicon Valley, we've done videos about this before. They can't afford to live in Silicon Valley. I mean, I don't want to say where I live, but about 35 minutes away from me, there is a beach. And because that beach is 35 minutes away, everything costs a lot of money. And their justification is well, you live near the water. Now, if I actually told you what city I was in, you would probably not think twice about it. Like, who wants to live there? But here's the reality. Like, you live near the water, they assume you want to pay for it. You live in Silicon Valley, they assume you have the money to pay for it. I'm sometimes fascinated when I go out and about in LA and you see people working these minimum wage jobs. And I wonder, how do they do it? How do they do it when the average apartment costs $2,700 a month to rent? Heck, for most people, that's more than what they make in a month. And you want to do a studio? It's not much better. So an article like this really highlights that there is not only a income problem for the lower class people. We're talking about the people who make minimum wage. We're talking about the people who make less than minimum wage driving for Uber and Lyft. We're talking about people who actually make serious money. And I think there's going to be a shakeup at some point. I mean, even me and my wife were talking about moving out of California. We love it here. We absolutely do. But it's just become so pricey that it's like, it's nice having Disneyland nearby. On the other hand, we can never afford to go to Disneyland. It's nice having, 30 movie theaters around. But we realistically only go to 3 to 5 of those theaters. We could find a much cheaper state to live in that have probably theaters of similar quality of the ones we go to, and we could be fine. It's going to be very interesting seeing what happens. The housing market was artificially inflated by a lack of evictions, free money from the government, and just, and of course a bunch of businesses buying out houses to rent to people and thus depleting the stock. There, down the road from me, there is a house that has actually been sold 3 times in the last year. Each time it's sold, it has sold to another bank for more money. That doesn't seem like a very healthy business to me. I can't put into words why that doesn't sound healthy, but it feels like something's off about that one. And now we have this article. You have this chart, this very scary chart, where it's almost like saying, hey, look, if you make this kind of money, you have a higher chance of still living paycheck to paycheck than just anyone else. Now, of course, things that this article doesn't talk about is, what does your lifestyle look like? Are you eating out all the time? Are you buying expensive toys like a Tesla, or are you happy with the hybrid? It doesn't get into things like that. The fact that it cites an Orange County, California example suggests that most of this is in California, and this is why California is self-destructing, if you will. It's why I'm seeing homeless people around my house that I had never seen before, because people just can't afford to live here. And what happens? They wind up on the street. And I don't know exactly what I want to say, because it's not like I have any great insight into how this happened. It's not like I have any great insight on how to get out of it. I mean, really, the most logical way to get out of the situation is for companies to charge less money. But nobody wants to do that. The only people who are willing to accept less money for the greater good are Uber drivers. Yeah, you get screwed, but hey, you're helping grandma get to the hospital when no one else will provide, so you're doing a service, so you feel good about it. It doesn't matter that it is costing you money, but this is the reality of some of these big areas. And of course, I don't live in Manhattan, but I've looked up apartment costs in Manhattan, Brooklyn, all these places, because New York is another place I'd love to live, believe it or not. and I don't know how I would ever move there. The cost is so astronomically high. So really, I'll probably wind up in Tennessee or something like that. You know, just it just kind of makes sense. A lot of my friends are there now, and they're still affordable. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to talk about this really briefly because maybe there's no real point to this video. Maybe this is just me kind of processing some of my concerns out loud to you guys, because I don't know, I'm starting to feel stuck with, and keep in mind, I am fairly well off. I'm not going to like share what's in my bank account or anything, but let's just say that I have a healthy savings, I have a healthy amount of assets, my wife is gainfully employed, there's some very, very promising leads on my end, and I have a burgeoning e-commerce business. YouTube channel's actually improving a little bit, so thank you everyone for watching more of the videos. And I should be in a position where I can put my head down on a pillow and say, I don't have to worry about an unexpected emergency expense or something like that. We will be able to get a house in a year, maybe less. We will live comfortably, and we don't have to worry about that. But we do have to worry about it, because this is just the way it is. And even though like our living situation is great and we're very blessed to be here, it cannot last forever. And even with the great situation we have, everything else is going up in price. We got our hybrid car partially because we needed a new vehicle, but also because we wanted to save money on gas. And then the gas rose to such an astronomical amount that we are paying the exact same amount of money in gas as we were when we had our gas guzzlers. Well, not gas. They weren't literally gas guzzlers, but you know, they use more gas than this car does. And on one hand, yeah, I'm glad that we got the hybrid in time, or else that would have been like a huge, huge cost of increase on gas. On the other hand, it's very frustrating because you bought the car to save money, and it doesn't really feel like you're saving money on it. Anyway, that is where we are going to leave this video. Just some thoughts that I'm thinking about. This is not a poor me thing. I'm sure we'll be fine. But hey, if you're struggling with money, here's the thing. People who are making $250,000, they're struggling with money too. Maybe the trick is we all just need to make $1 million a year somehow. However you do that. Bitcoin, maybe? Yeah, I don't know about that anymore. All right, folks, that's where we're going to end this one. This was more of a contemplative video, but I'd like to know what you think. Are you having some of these same issues? I'd love to know. Comment below, like, favorite, share, subscribe, and as always, flame responsibly. Have a good one.